It's 6 o'clock. Would you like to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, I would.
I was like, thank God, but now I have from this concert.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, I gotta tell you about what I did with Brett.
Thank you.
I made him a teacher. It's so cute.
Today is December 16th. We're here in West Rutland for the Quarry Valley Board meeting. The first matter is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda? If not, a motion would be in order to accept the agenda as presented.
I move to accept the agenda.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Public comment, we don't have any public with us this evening. Old business, is there any old business for the board? New business, the co-curricular committee recommendations. You'll find that in your packet. And who would like to speak to that?
Me? Okay. So the committee, I think we met a couple times. This is what we've come up with, which is similar. We tried to take a little bit of what every school does. Went with a 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, 10 to 14 year pay scale. Those numbers for the coaches is basically what West Rutland pays their coaches. What we did do, the difference on this that would be something would be up for discussion is the added column that we put in at the far right where it says anybody who's been coaching a varsity or any level sport for 15 plus years that would be a new extension on their salary. Down below, which is a little bit more complicated.
Do you want notes?
No, sure. The notes, anybody who is currently coaching and if their salary is lower than what is currently proposed, they would be grandfathered in. Levels of experience. I mean, I'm just reading this. If you have questions about it, just speak up.
I have a question immediately,
Sure.
actually. So grandfathering the lower salary, when I hear that, it means they will stay at the lower salary.
No.
If it's current, if it's lower than the new recommended
If it's lower
salary.
than the new recommended.
Do we have any of those? No.
And they will stay at the lower rate
I
if
think
that's
you mean
true.
higher.
I should have said higher.
Higher.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
mean
that's a
higher.
typo. That should say higher, exactly. And I'm not even sure if we have anybody in that situation, but in case we did, but you're right, it should say higher.
Just, that was kind of one of those, like, looking at the three schools when we moved this up, if someone had 4 to 6 years, say the 4 to 6 years experience at varsity level and one school's paying 3,500 and it's at 3,000, they'll
True,
keep
that-
that.
right. That would
We
be
just
the
said,
reason.
we're not gonna,
I thought that was the
Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
but when I read it, it seemed a little
well,
backwards.
yeah. When I read it for the 15th time, I finally picked it up. Levels of experience, coaches can get credit for coaching at the higher level moving down, but not get credit for lower level moving up.
You mean
So for-
grade-wise?
For grade-wise.
Okay.
So for instance, if a high school coach suddenly wanted to coach 5th and 6th grade basketball, we would put them at the higher end of the scale. But if it was going the other way up, 5th and 6th grade coach suddenly wanted to apply and receive the varsity coach, they would start at that year one.
Is the experience specific to each sport?
yes.
Yes.
Yes, it
yeah.
says it down there.
does it say
Exactly,
that?
which I
Okay.
think I said in there. Yes, credit also does not go across sports, so if you happen to be a varsity soccer coach, and you then wanted to be the varsity basketball coach, you wouldn't get you wouldn't get those years as a soccer coach for the basketball coach. You would start year one for the basketball position. Anybody have any questions about that except for the typo?
What's the reasoning for if someone is teaching are coaching junior high and they want to apply for varsity for not giving them credit. It seems like historically, we've seen it here even within this past year, our season, that we struggle to get coaches. So I'm wondering why we wouldn't want to encourage coaches we have in the system to move up in the system.
Well,
I think part of it is just the difference in, I mean, you could coach at the 5th and 6th grade level and it's not the same intensity and it's not the same hours, and all of a sudden say, I want to go do the varsity level, and it's just more
right, I mean, the commitment is higher.
commitment and the time and the experience to going from 5th and 6th grade to the varsity
They
level.
would get more money.
They get more money,
Get more
but they just
money.
won't get the
Because-
experience.
But they may
It's a
not get
a
10
higher
years of
level of
experience
pay.
as a 5th and 6th grade coach. They're not going to start as 10 years of experience at the varsity level. That would be the difference.
And Joe, when we're talking about experience, does that mean at any school
So,
or this school?
It's like if we were to hire somebody here who had been at Mill River coaching varsity basketball,
Yep.
and they for 5 years, they came here for their 6th year, we would pay them at the 6th year. So it would be varsity experience anywhere, not just in your home school.
Should we also put in here that each sport and even down below activities should be this is the rate for one coach or one advisor, and then if there's co-coaches or advisors,
Co-coaches, they would split it. Yeah, we can add that. So that was that discussion. The next discussion was for clubs, which could be anything within fine arts, other extracurriculars, professional courtesies, which may be on the licensing board. Somebody was on that if they were somebody was doing a chess club, anything that does not necessarily fit in the athletic realm. We came up with this scale to decide how much that person or those people may make. And if you want to just look at it a little bit before I speak to it, because you may have questions. It's all based on a point system. So we took into consideration the level of responsibility, the number of students you would be working with, and the hours that you may be putting into this club or activity. So if you were let's say, the class advisor for 4 years, and however other schools do it, we do it, if you're a class advisor your freshman year, you follow them all the way up through your senior year. Other schools may do differently. That's a pretty high responsibility, and you're dealing with all the kids in that grade level, and it usually equals to, 40 plus hours for the year. And it's pretty high responsibility, especially if you're the senior class advisor. You would get 9 points, which would be at the bottom, and you would make that rate 0 to 10 years. And this kind of didn't come out exactly the way it should have. And then far right would be 10 plus years. If it was a chess club that you were only going to meet in the months of September, October, and you were only working with 5 kids, and the responsibility wasn't that high, then you would be maybe, if you add those points up, you may be at 3 points, and you would make the 3 to 4 point scale, which would be about $250 for that 3 months that you may do it. Or if you were to do this your 11th year, being the chess club advisor, you could make up to $350. So we kind of took what everybody does at their schools, came up with a happy medium. We all struggle with how much those positions really should make. So we really thought it should come down to number of kids you work with, level of responsibility, and the hours that you put into it, and take those three things and put it together.
How did that look across schools? Did you see that this made a huge difference in what somebody would have gotten now? Say, for example, today, if I was on the chess club, and then next year if I was on the chess club, is it very different? Do you think
Similar.
it was similar?
I mean, for us, the class advisors would be making a lot more money than they do now, and they should.
Yeah.
They're really underpaid, but everything else is about the same. The other schools would have to speak to their clubs specifically, but for West Rutland, it would be similar. I'm not sure about Proctor or Holtby.
Question: would there be sort of a uniform method for defining that responsibility.
Well, and that would be.
seems a little
Yeah,
wishy-washy.
it is, and it would come up, it would be the decision of the administrator
Okay. And
to
would there
decide
be
that.
Something like a job description, I guess,
Yeah,
for lack of
a
better term,
rubric, whatever we would come up
that
with.
would just be clearly spelled
Yeah.
out, stated, boom, boom.
Sure. I mean, if somebody just wanted to run a club for a month, or if it was a year-long club, and if we would decide, what is the level of responsibility we're talking here? Are you going to be taking these kids places, or are you just going to be working out of your classroom one day a week with 5 kids, compared to maybe taking 30 kids and twice a month you're going to be going to the bowling alley if it was a bowling club? Something like that. We would decide what that level of responsibility would be.
It seems like you put a lot of thought into this, Joe.
Well, enough.
Just to play devil's advocate, I have several questions and issues with this rubric. One, a few of these areas are subjective, and if it's the administrator that's determining it, that means that there's the chance that we may have different rates across the different schools. Two, the person doing it, the hours, looking at the hours, that could be subjective. So if you have a class advisor, you may have a class advisor that puts in 10 hours a year, but then you may have another class advisor that puts in 30 hours
Well,
a
I
year.
can guarantee you, we don't have class advisors putting 10 hours a year. I mean, our class advisors are meeting on a weekly basis, they're doing fundraisers.
Well, you're referring to what, senior class advisor?
No, freshmen
All
all
of
the
the
way
classes?
through. They're putting tremendous amount of hours in doing fundraising with kids. Sometimes they're here on Saturdays doing bottle drives, again, we know that. As the administrators in the
Yeah.
building, we know what each one of these clubs take and how much time is being put into it, so.
And then looking at the students, I mean, so a couple things there. So if you start it and you have 9 students and then 2 students get added, I mean, is that amount going to be, is it going to be based on a snapshot? And then again, we're going to have different rates for a chess club that's being paid. I mean, you could have 9 students in one school and 11 in the other, and you're going to have different rates being paid to those advisors. It's just going to be very difficult to manage. And I think I thought our thought and process going forward was to streamline things and have things equitable and comparable across schools, across the SU. And this rubric is just going to make assigning rates to clubs and activities a nightmare at SU.
Or what could happen is you now have this system, maybe the committee or the principals get back together and actually take their existing clubs and assign them and create something and bring it back.
So
mean,
I
this
think
would be
that's a good
great way of
idea,
doing
just
it.
like when we have things tonight in our packet, people know when they apply what the stipend is for that particular thing. The other thing is, I'm just curious what the change in value is. We don't have a list of how many clubs there are, and I really don't like when you say, well, we might run a club for a month. I mean, I don't want to get
Well,
in.
these are clubs that are already pre-existing, so they're not something that could come down the road. We looked at what is pre-existing now.
Right, but part of doing this and part of taking it out of the contract is to give the power back to the board and back so that if we had clubs that aren't in existence that we have to carry currently because this is in the contract and we don't have the ability to take it out, we can withdraw those and incorporate clubs that are actually kids are interested in. So I think it would be behoove us to have a list of what the clubs are in front of us and to know what the fiscal implication is for this.
One other last point I'd like to make is too, what if it's a club or a position that's working with staff and not students? So like you mentioned, licensing doesn't work with students, they're working more with staff applications.
Right, we'd have to look at that.
And
I don't know if you call that a club. That's
not a
just
club.
that's really just a professional
professional.
activity.
Right.
so would that be based on this rubric, or is that going to be a whole separate?
Well, it has a stipend addressed to it though.
Yeah.
Licensing board does, so that's not an option. I mean, I know that currently when we see it come through, everyone pays a different stipend, but there is a stipend assigned to that, and it, actually, I think if we go back and look, it probably is in the co-curricular, in the
It's in some of them. It's $300, and then even
Some
just
places
looking at
490.
yeah, and then looking at like some of the extracurricular that's in the packet tonight. There's things like a climate co-coordinator, EST co-coordinator. So those are the type of things that maybe don't fit into this rubric. That again,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we do it right the first time and that we're not having to backtrack.
Joe, looking at this, could the committee that you serve on assign stipends based on your knowledge and using this as sort of a rubric?
But I'm not sure, like, I know we don't have a lot of clubs here. Some that are still listed in our co-curricular menu are defunct and we don't run anymore. Joe, I'm not sure what you have.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of,
We could,
you talking about the ones on the tonight's agenda, or are you?
No, I
talking-
was actually just
the
to
whole
be
school.
able to see how much, to be able to, instead of saying it's out there, maybe this,
we
maybe
could
that.
attach it, look at the, yeah.
Look at what
Yes,
we, if
you
we did
guys
this
could-
with what our current.
Is there a
clubs and-
proctor
yeah.
You could
delegate that was
recommend
with you
which
guys?
clubs to take off.
Yeah.
Which ones to move forward.
And then look at this
And then look at this,
see
put it
how
on a
does work
grid.
out. Yeah, the three of us could
And
actually
then the
sit down and
last
do that.
piece would be recommendations if somebody proposes a club, how you go
Right.
about it.
Right,
And I
You would
mean,
use this grid to,
Absolutely.
yeah.
and you know, some of these clubs, I mean, when I first got to Polteny, there was an environmental club, and then the kids
Right.
graduated, or the staff member who was running it moved on, you know, and clubs come and go, and with peaks with interest and then drop off and stuff like that. And that was, I mean, it was hard. We were talking about this. That was, you know, we used the chess club, for example, where, you know, you could just be sitting in your room for an hour after school with the kids in your room, as compared to, you know, if you're, like Joe said, we looked at, for example, we have the Model Congress. They put a lot of time in, and then they go away for a weekend down to Springfield, Mass. So there's that commitment of overnight trip, watching kids overnight. That's where we're looking at the high responsibility piece of it, that type of thing. And, you know, not as much responsibility sitting in your classroom for an hour after school as compared to taking kids overnight. So,
But I think you also have to look, you don't know what 10 kids you might have sitting in the classroom too.
No,
So-
exactly. Yeah, that's-
So when you assign and you say, you know, 5 or 6 kids, it's dependent upon what those kids are. I think it would be good to come back with a list of what the clubs are, clubs that are going forward, and maybe just an idea of how many are in the club. And if there are new club ideas, I mean, that was one of the reasons that we came to this agreement to do this and get it out of the contract, so that if we have interest for new clubs, we can do that and be able to fund those. So, because at this point, we have no idea what this looks like in terms of dollars.
So we can go back and everybody's, the existing clubs that are actually functioning clubs, we could go back, list them all between all 3 schools, and then look at this and attach
Yeah.
an amount to each one of them so you can see what it looks like.
and also
That
look,
sounds great.
look
Okay.
at the ones that you have listed that are not operating.
Right, we'll
And
just-
say, these
Right.
we recommend taking
Right.
out.
So I guess I would fear that that still doesn't address all of Lewis's concerns, though. Which now, thank you
I
for.
mean, I think if we have a list, I definitely think having a list and what the value of each of those definitely adds a little bit more stability to it. And when people are signing up to be those positions and when we're working on contracts, if we have a list that we can reference, I think that is a big help.
Then would you want to see something like a tier rate for each club? For example, let's just stay on this chess club rant here. So we go chess club, between 5 and 10 students, it's going to be this rate. If it happens to be between 10 and 15 students, boom, it's automatically going to be a little bit bigger, you know, to address those sort of concerns. Or is it more along the line of, hey, chess club, 1 student, 2 students, 20 students, whatever it is. I mean, I think as long as there was a firm plan, your concern is addressed. But if it's
Yes.
loose,
Yeah, I want to get rid of the looseness of it. and
I
have
think
a
we
firm
should have a minimum, just like we have for teams. I mean, we're not gonna have a team,
It's like that's
you know.
5 basically.
We talked to, you
We
guys
did,
talked.
we did.
I thought you said five
I think
or
we said
something.
5, like if we're not gonna have clubs of 3, we're not gonna have clubs of 4, but if 5 was the number that we would go with.
So I think.
And I
so
think there does
that's
have to be a
something that needs to
process
be-
when people come to us about, well, I want to start such and such a club. I think they have to put a proposal together. They have to decide, it can't be just, I want a club, let's start one. It has to be a little bit more in-depth than that. We've had that problem in the past where teachers have wanted to start something, and it's hard to tell them no, because they're doing things for kids. But sometimes it's just not feasible. So there does have to be some sort of step process put in place to start a club.
Or we have something like a first-year club stipend. So if someone wants to try to do a club.
Yeah, you can do that.
And you know it's only
Yeah.
gonna be a year because it's seniors or something like that, that they have a great interest in, we could have something like that. So,
So we'll go back, we'll look at all the existing clubs, we'll look at the ones that aren't really happening and put next to that, that they're not happening, and attach an amount to each one of those and bring it back.
and I think it would be good if you can, put the date when a club ceased to exist, so we have an idea if it's been 2 years or
Sure.
if it hasn't been in existence for 8 years. I mean, I know there are clubs that we carry that, you know, just haven't been anything, but just so we have an idea of where that is too.
Right.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
You? Approval of November 18 minutes.
Is it?
I wrote it all down if you wanna.
Well, I can make, before I leave, I'll make a copy of that. About the rest of this.
I think so.
A
Can we-
motion to approve.
Sorry.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Joe just asked me, and it's a good question, what about the rest of the proposal, the varsity coaches?
Yeah, coaches in
We didn't
general.
really get feedback on that.
Well, I think we need to have the same, what the financial
And just
impact.
put it on the agenda for everything? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll work on it.
I think it would be good to know how many that would be grandfathered and how many, I mean,
For us, West Rutland, it wouldn't be anybody. I'm
I
not sure
think
about the
for
other two
Polteny, it was
schools.
just one of the elementary school coaches was gonna
Yeah.
be what he was making, and then would be, what this was proposed at was less than what he is making currently, so.
Right.
It's like from a couple $100, it wasn't like
so I just think that would be good, because this is part of building the budget, knowing what we're building into extracurricular. And so we've historically built the same number in every year in that line item, because you're handcuffed by what is in the contract. So, just so we know what that number
With the
is.
understanding is that, every year, we're hiring a new 5th and 6th grade coach or a 7th and 8th grade coach. So it's always it's a moving target. You can somewhat predict who your varsity coaches are gonna be, but it's very hard to predict your lower level coaches. Sometimes you're hiring 2 days before the season starts. So,
And sometimes we don't, I mean, we just brought back girls JV basketball after 5 or 6 years of not having a team. So it's, some years you have it, other years you don't, so
Right.
I'm not sure with stuff like that too.
Well, I think what Lisa's saying is, we know budgets fluctuate, they're budgets. I mean,
Right,
we're putting them together in October, but this will give us a little bit firmer grip on what the
want some
budget
solid
should be.
numbers
Right
on
now,
that
it's
stuff.
kind of like we just do it, and what is it really based on?
Yeah,
Take our current year and put it in.
that's what I
this
would
and-
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have sort of an estimation for
Right.
what it's been in the past, and even though, of course, it was.
And come with the same, like a list of if you have JV this year, that you have JV this year.
Yeah.
And what those current stipends are. So,
And efficient.
okay. A motion would be in order for the November 18th meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minute.
All right. Are there any changes, corrections, deletions? All right, second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Warrants have been signed by Seth.
Yes, sir.
And,
I was, because we got through the minutes, because I did the minutes last time.
Gotcha. Okay, you have, actually, it wasn't in your packet, they were just, on your table tonight, distributed the superintendent's report and the assistant superintendent's report. So that is for your review. Principal reports are in the packets, they would have been emailed to you. I'd really like to focus the bulk of the meeting on the budget this evening. So unless there's anything in any of those reports that board members or principals feel they need to speak to,
I'm sorry. Did you get, was there a motion to approve the warrants?
no, we haven't done the warrants or the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
So how about a motion would be in order to approve the consent agenda, which will include the warrant, superintendent's report, assistant superintendent's report, and principal's reports.
Yeah, I didn't get the superintendent's.
Oh,
We have one more set.
you can take mine to look at. Here.
I don't have any more copies, Seth.
Well,
I handed them out, there's not
Can't
one.
approve it.
you're gonna have to.
Here, give mine.
I'll give you your, you one.
Get a mine.
There's those,
We can share it,
Yeah,
so it's totally okay.
did you get?
Next time you'll be earlier, Seth.
I don't see how that would make more copies happen.
You would have
I don't
been,
understand the way the process
I don't
works.
you would have been
why
here
there
to get
aren't enough.
grab a copy.
I did 12, so I don't know how we just didn't have enough.
Dude, there's an extra packet right here,
They're not in the packet.
They were on
They're on
top.
I'm
top.
fine with somebody having mine.
There.
but they're on top.
Okay. So, a motion for the consent agenda, warrants and reports.
I will move to
Thank you.
Approve?
approve the consent
Yes.
agenda, including warrants, reports.
All right, second.
I second. I feel like I'm doing this too much.
All those in favor? Great. Retirements, resignations, we have 3 retirements that we need to accept
Yes.
this evening.
You have one additional one that doesn't need to be in there. You did it back in October, but it's,
They're not in our
Mary
packet.
Ogelus.
Marie Coombs, I have 3 letters here. Marie Coombs, kindergarten teacher for West Rutland School. Dawn Daly, reading interventionist at West Rutland School. And Mary Ojala. Ojala, sorry. She's kindergarten at West Rutland School.
So a motion would be in order to accept the retirements as presented.
Yes.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Contract recommendations. You have extracurricular in front of you. Are there any questions?
I think there's an addition, and I'm just,
There's what?
I think there's one addition, late addition.
Okay.
There is. Okay, so Courtney Polacek is being recommended as being the long-term physical education instructor for Polteny Elementary School. That's Jake's,
Proctor.
I'm sorry, Proctor, thank you. That's Jake's leave. They had one that you had approved, but that person backed out, and Courtney has agreed to do it. She's currently doing the same thing for Rutland Town, and will be done with that
Oh.
job, and would do it for Polteny Elementary. And
Okay.
all the rest,
Oh, so we have two
Has a
pages.
question.
We have 2 pages and they're different.
Well, you guys didn't get,
So Danielle Fagan is on one for the.
and Daniel Fagan is another one that's an addition, so,
Okay. So,
yes. And that is for the licensing board stipend
okay.
for Proctor Elementary School also.
what's
Oh,
the
we
name
do have
again?
different ones.
Danielle Fagan.
Danielle Fagan.
So on one, she's at the bottom.
Okay,
Yep.
I don't have that.
There's actually 2.
Yeah.
We had to add those
Okay,
two.
so I'm sorry, that
Oh,
was
yeah, okay.
Proctor.
Elementary.
Elementary Licensing Board,
Okay.
They're both wrong.
Okay.
and the amount, if you need it, is $459.
For both?
No.
No, and the per diem rate for long-term sub is $217.83.
Okay. Questions?
We have a question from Pulteney, actually.
Sure.
We would just like to know what
The climate coordinator?
climate co-coordinator is.
I would like to know
No
that too.
idea.
We have no idea, so we probably shouldn't recommend
know.
without at least a definition.
What is that?
I don't know, it's elementary, I'm text Kristen.
Yes.
And that's a lot of money, because there's 2 of them.
Yeah, right.
I don't have a climate coordinator.
Weather every day?
That's me.
I think
Is it a school climate?
I don't know if it's the
Is
MTSS
it
or
like
the,
go green?
Honestly, when I saw
Or is
that,
it
I
the
thought it was, I
wellness?
thought that's what it was. I thought, really? Science, maybe?
Are you texting? We can
Yes.
table it and come back. She's probably sitting with her phone. I'm serious.
No, I'm sure
At the
she
end of the day, I
is.
think you know. But just nice to know what it is.
And why we need 2 of them.
Well, it's half rate. Presumably. No, okay, that came out wrong. What I mean is, the amount is split amongst the co-coordinators, correct?
Yeah, it
Oh,
says
so-
co-coordinator.
But when you add them
Still.
together, that's a lot.
And then
Oh,
there's
sure.
also the EST co-coordinators.
Up with JV coaches and,
I guess what is EST as well?
Those are the educational
Educational
support.
support team.
Support team.
doesn't everybody have a coordinator in their building?
Or
We do.
Yep.
School climate, it's called.
No.
I would like to say I know for sure. I think it's wellness, but
Could be wellness.
Isn't that what special
But is it
educators are
wellness
for?
of staff wellness or student or
usually kind of everything.
everything?
But let's see what, let's get it from Kristen. That's just my assumption.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing, but I was thinking like,
So,
so it runs, Kristen said they run their PBIS
Oh,
and organizes a school-wide behavior system.
Are they new positions, or have they been?
They've been in
Relatively
place
new.
for at least a few years.
Oh, I'm gonna have her call in here, hold on. If you don't mind.
no, I think that's a good idea.
She told me if we needed her, just,
And does any other school
I
have
hate being
those?
the
T
middleman.
co-coordinator?
Like does this all the time.
You know, so at West Rutland, we have Pam Knott kind of heads our EST program. We have a PBIS is actually one of our action planning teams, so that's not a stipended position. And our wellness is actually through through VHI.
But
So-
this isn't wellness, I was
Right,
incorrect.
so that's how we handle that. We do not have a climate committee, and I don't believe we pay Pam for her role within EST.
and I think Proctor Elementary School is very similar, and just knowing the people that are on it, and I've never seen us pay a stipend either.
Got you on speaker.
Okay.
Hi, Kristen.
Very loud as well, that's great.
So why don't you ask the question?
So, Kristen, they were asking about the school climate coordinators, what they actually do.
Okay, those are existing positions, and the girls have been given stipends. They help with our PBIS. They organize our school-wide behavior system, and take inventory of all the classroom stars and awards and things like that. So that I don't do it all by myself. They assist me in that.
How long has this position been in place?
Oh, Oh, I would say at least 4 years without having anything in front of me.
So I guess when we talk about the extracurricular that we talked before, it would be interesting to see within the schools these different positions that exist in some schools and not in others, and the length of time that they have existed, because it seems like that position is actually being incorporated within the duties of existing employees in other buildings without it being a stipend, so.
I'm having trouble hearing. I didn't hear that, Joe.
Oh, that wasn't directly at you. That she was just saying, we've been talking about the co-curricular thing and about, seeing what every school has and what everybody pay, just to kind of get an idea of
Okay.
what we have, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have any other questions, Kristen, or?
Just a real quick, also the EST coordinator, just a real quick, boom.
He did, Joe.
Same nickel explanation as the school climate.
EST, they are the ones, Margot and Amy. They organize all the meetings and send out notices and put all of the information into Goalview. Again, that's a pre-existing stipend that they've received.
Okay.
So a special educator doesn't do that?
No.
No. It varies from district to district, actually, and I have seen districts that pay, stipends for that, and I've seen districts that assign people. It does vary from school to school, district to district.
Sure.
And I think this is one of those things, again, where you're a newly merged district and people do it different ways.
Thank you.
All right, we'll call you, we'll let you know if we need you in again.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
EST coordinator, I never did that.
She can explain it better.
All right. Motion, comments, questions?
I think we both have concerns about that because we've all worked in districts where that's not a stipend. So
Yeah.
it just,
Just seems
I
like it
think
needs
it's
to
a
be
fut-
revisited.
Yeah, I think it's a future target. So my view at the moment, just me, is we probably move forward, but it's something to consider for the future, maybe starting next year about maybe harmonizing.
Or figuring out if there's other kinds of things that they're doing differently than a committee would do that would be part of a teacher's responsibility anyway. Like maybe how they're working it in Proctor is different somehow. I don't know. To sort of justify an extra.
And these aren't really, I wouldn't call these co-curricular things. These are stipends they get for, I guess, professional work. And it kind of goes along with the licensing board. There are some stipends out there, school to school, that vary. And again, I've seen schools that the teachers just do the licensing work, and I've seen schools where they get really big stipends for it.
Sure.
Because.
But I think
they
as
do a lot of
we're
work.
talking about, sitting
Yeah.
here and talking about equity and talking
Yeah.
about duplicity and, we're looking at, we all belong to one union, we all belong to one, that we need to assess those things. And these are things that we were supposed to be doing here in the first year, about looking and seeing how we can be saving, and, we knew that we were going to have to be taking on a little bit more responsibility in different avenues, so,
Well, maybe we could, have Debbie or something look at what are all the different stipends that run through her office, and just form a little committee with the principals to take a look at them
sure.
as we go down.
Yeah, it just seems like we've asked the principals to do a lot of cutting. And so, what is this $500 and this $500 and this $500 and this, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but when there's 10,000
$2,000
here
bucks.
and 2,000 here and
Right.
so and I'm not saying that they don't deserve the stipends, I just think that's just another thing to look at in the future, so. And I don't think all the schools have to do it all the same. I really don't, because we're not all the same school, right? And
No.
I know we've talked about equity, and I get that, but, you know, the boarding schools have a lot more kids in them too, to go to.
Absolutely.
A lot more.
But these aren't issues, I mean, this is EST, not issues dealing with students, this is issue dealing with staff, so.
Right.
I mean, they're making almost as much as people that are dealing with fifth and sixth grade kids, which is certainly a lot more stress if we want to go back and look at the scale here, so.
Depends on the
Yeah.
individual.
Well,
But yeah, no, I think it's something to look at. I don't know that the end point has to be all schools do it all the same for every single thing we're talking about. Because I just don't know that that's realistic, so.
well, I think that's what gets us in trouble when we look at stipends. When one school is paying stipends for something that an employee in another school is doing as part of their job.
Right.
And I think that's where issues come to play, so.
No, I definitely think the justification has to be there, for sure.
And it has come up already, so,
Yeah,
where one school's questioning because another school gets paid for it and they don't, so.
yeah.
Of course.
So here's my concern as a
Why don't
board
we-
member, help me out here. This is the first time that I've had this thing in my head. Are you going to ask us to make a motion to okay all of these in a clump?
I can, or you could approve them individually, you could approve them with the exception of X.
Judy, what would
But
you?
I would recommend you move forward and approve them, because my guess is they probably already started the work.
Sure.
It's been done for years. And that said, we should look at them. That's another area
that
we
makes
really need
sense.
to examine, but I don't think we punish them because we realize there's inequities.
Right, exactly.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. The basis of the question is just the fact that we would have been blindly approving or denying without
Sure.
clarification.
Yeah.
So I think like March, you can examine them then and determine, once they come back, whether all of these things are going to be moving forward or how it's going to be going.
Figure it
But-
out for what it will be
Yeah, we're in
like.
December. I'm
next
sure
year.
they probably started this doing work in August, so.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's another good point too, and I've seen this a lot over the years. I mean, here we are in December
we're
approving
just
stuff,
approving.
seeing
Yeah.
these for the first time, and then if they truly have started in September, why are we only seeing these now? And
Yeah.
so it takes away the board's ability to approve or deny these because they've already been doing the work.
Yep,
Yep.
that's a very good point.
So it should be ready to go for the new school year.
So I would say to make this a future agenda item, say for the March agenda, to review all paid teacher stipend positions.
I just want to ask one other question as well, right? So, does anyone know, Louis, maybe I'm looking at you too. So, could it be that we're only seeing it now because maybe 3 months went by and it was an unfilled position and then it was later filled?
I highly doubt that.
Okay.
If they've started since August, no.
If that happens, would it be prorated? If just imagine, it might be highly unlikely.
I
but
mean,
if-
positions are usually prorated if they're full year positions and they don't work the full year.
Yeah.
As long as we're told that at the time.
Yep.
So the school staff have to do a contract prep form in which they tell us what the position is, the person, the amount, and all the particulars for it. And so we're going based on that to develop a contract and put that on the board agenda for approval. And so if that information isn't given to us, sometimes we'll question it. But other times, we're assuming that it's just late because that seems to be what happens a lot of the time. These type of things, I think it's more of, it's just they're just now thinking of it, and so now they're putting it on there. I don't think they're on filled. They're probably the same people that did it the prior years.
Yep, okay.
Okay,
After all that, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the
Fabulous.
recommendations.
second.
Take my
Second.
money's worth.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. And so you can look at that again then in March to those. Vacancies, do we have vacancies?
I do not have a list of them.
Okay, and the new hire sheet is just a continuum for you for information only in your packet.
People moving.
Do we want to do tuition before we get into the budget?
I'd recommend we do tuition and some, maybe even some of the other things, because I think we can talk about budget a little bit in open session, and I think we're going to need to go into executive session to discuss personnel.
Okay, so do you want to
So,
go with tuition?
so in the packet is a sheet for the announced tuition. It looks like this, and it lists the current rates of tuition for elementary and secondary for some of the area high schools and elementary schools, as well as my recommendation. So the FY20 rate, which is our current year for elementary school tuition, which would be K through 6, is currently set at $13,500. As you can see from the list, it's somewhere in the middle with the other schools. Slate Valley, which is Fairhaven and all of Orwell, Benson, is at 14.5. Mill River, which would be Timoth, Shrewsbury, Clarendon, any of their elementary schools is at 16.3. Rutland City is on the lower end just because of their size and student counts, and they're at 10.4. So there is a range. My recommendation is to increase our tuition rate for elementary to 14.5 for next year.
How many elementary tuition students do we receive?
So majority of our tuition students for elementary come from Ira, and they go to West Rutland. And I believe it's approximately 10 students. And then for secondary, same thing. Our current rate is at 17,000. We're actually on the higher end compared with the other schools. Rutland Town really isn't a good comparison because they only have 7.8, but I did throw it in there. Rutland City is at 15.3. Slate Valley, which would be Fairhaven Union High School, is at 16,000. Mill River is at 15.5. And then the private school tuition rate is 15,933. The thing that I would say though is a lot of these schools, other high schools are larger, so their cost is lower because they're just economies of scale. I think our high schools are the smallest in compared to all of these other ones. So my recommendation is to keep our rate at $17,000, same as this year. We'd still be at the high end for all the other schools.
Questions, comments?
Does it dissuade anyone from coming? Is anybody able to come?
Not really. I mean,
Because their town
when,
pays on
when
their
it comes
behalf.
to, yeah, when it comes to tuition, it's the town that's paying, and it's the parents that's choosing, so it doesn't really have any impact. In the rare instance that we have a parent-paid tuition, for example, if we had somebody from Fairhaven that wanted to come to Poultney and didn't qualify for school choice, and the parent would have to pay tuition. So those would be the only types of scenarios, and I know Poultney had one for a few years.
Talking
I'm not
one or
sure
two in the
if the other
district,
schools
basically,
have.
which-
As far as parents pay, yeah, the rest of them are all, like, the Wells and Middletown kids pay the tuition and Paula,
So
so.
Poultney had somebody from
We
Whitehall.
had someone from Whitehall come in for a couple of years, so the parents. paid
So
all
in
that.
our area, in our SU, we have 3 towns that pay tuition for high school. And well, Ira does all the way through, and then Middletown Springs and Wells Springs. All their kids are tuitioned out.
And then Rutland Town.
And, yeah, then Rutland Town. And then next year Ludlow will be doing it for their high school kids, so there's a possibility you could pick up some there.
Like 95% of our tuition students are within our SU.
Right.
And your budgeting, like the SU budget is set up at that rate, basically.
Yes.
Fair enough.
The tuition revenue for our budget, as well as the expense budgets for Wellsprings and Ira, are set up at at these rates.
To give you perspective, I know that Green Mountain Union High School, which is more in size of our schools, or Pulteney anyway, they just announced at 19,000 and change. Yeah.
Getting crazy.
Yep. Isn't that crazy?
Again, blood in the water.
Yeah. They smell Black River.
Do we need to vote on this?
Yes.
Yes.
A motion to approve the FY21 tuition recommendations.
I move that we approve it.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And where would you like to go next, Louis?
Do you want to continue on with the other business and we'll come back to budget?
Sure, what else do we have? That was the only, we have the budget and tuition
There it is.
on our agenda.
Future meeting date.
Louis, we kept it streamlined.
How about just the meeting date?
Yeah, the meeting
Take a
date.
few minutes.
Oh, sure. So, the next meeting is on, Martin Luther King. Could we move it to that Tuesday?
I'm going to request maybe the week before, if at all possible.
I think the week before
I'm out of
I'm
town.
totally booked.
Okay, so I will not be present at all week of the 20th.
Okay.
Same for SU meeting, actually.
Okay. Anyone else with Tuesday, the 21st?
Louis and I have the Rutland Town pre-meeting, although one of us, we could split, Louis. That's on the 21st. I don't know. The 22nd is the GRCSU board. The 15th is open.
I'm fine with splitting if you want on the 21st.
You want to split on the 21st and we'll figure it out? Because I think this budget will be, I think this budget will probably be far enough that I could probably, well, we'll figure it out. Whoever goes, we could split.
Yeah, I mean, if you said 15th is open,
You don't need to go to the Rutland Town pre-meeting. No, that's
in-
like a town
I'm
thing.
in Europe. I can't even call in for this one. I mean,
Yeah.
Where in Europe?
Austria.
You're excused.
But it's if it's budget vote,
You want to be here?
we're already a man down,
Yeah,
a
Yeah.
person.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So the week before, I am not available.
Oh,
Is that the 15th, the week before?
Yeah.
Well, this is a conundrum.
Keep it on the 20th?
Well, the 20th is, no school. It's Martin Luther King.
We've always kept it on the 20th, haven't they? The schools are pretty much open, aren't they?
No, they're closed.
Well, there's people.
Oh, I thought you
You
meant.
can get in the door.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever moved it in the past because it starts running in with everything, that's all.
I don't care. I mean, principals are off, so depending on where we are for budgets.
Not gonna know if it matters to anybody or not, but that Proctor and West Rutland are playing a girls' basketball game here that night. So, that's something.
Where is it?
Here.
Here.
So, the parking lot will be,
We carpool.
And that is a big deal, because I
It is a big
went
deal.
around it 100 times
so
today.
just have that in the back of
Well,
your
you
head.
know, Louis and I can split the 21st and
Okay.
figure it
Right,
out.
so would
So
we
the
have a
21st.
quorum on the 21st?
Oh, right,
A week,
if
so
Seth
that's-
isn't here.
But if there's a way that at least some information, so I can, if I get some budget information, so that I can.
Well, we'll
Yay or
see
nay?
how far we are.
Is it possible, I'll just make this suggestion, to start this meeting at like 5?
I would love it. Oh, but some
It's
people
just a
will get out of
suggestion,
work.
because then maybe we can get, like, whoever's going up to Rutland Town can get their part done, whether it's myself or Louis, like Louis could do the budget, or I could.
Yeah, I'm sorry, which day are you talking about now, the 21st?
The
So it's gonna be
21st.
midnight.
What's the Tuesday,
Oh, you're-
what's the
oh.
Tuesday before
That's my
I think
issue.
I've
Oh,
got.
you
It's not
don't,
like you're
you're
just
not here.
down.
So I wonder if it
Yeah.
would be better to go ahead and do budget and then make a
I
decision
have
on the day.
serious
What's
jet
wrong
lag
with the
these
Monday
days,
after
so
that?
maybe yes.
Is that
But
too
that's
It's just
when it
late.
starts.
It's too late?
Yeah, we gotta get warnings done.
Okay.
Even the 21st is a little
Three
bit
times
late,
a year.
but
Well, the 14th, we have Ira, but Ira's at 5 o'clock. Louis. We could do that and just piggyback and get it done with.
Tuesday, the 14th. How is that?
Say you're not here that
I could probably, it's easier for me than,
Why not?
The
We're
Monday.
Meetings all day anyway. That's our admin meeting.
is that what it is, Tuesday, the 14th?
Yeah. We've got, that says 7, but they've changed their meetings to 5.
Okay.
So we could do that, and then one of us could end the meeting, and the other one could drive up
Okay.
here, and then the other one could join.
So what, Tuesday, the 14th?
A-okay. I mean, actually, I didn't know that.
Jim, Tom, Tuesday, the 14th?
At 5. No, 6.
Six.
6, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tuesday, the 14th? All right, so Tuesday, the 14th at 6. And then just to put on your calendar, annual meeting is in Poultney, in 25th, right? February?
I'll just double check it for us.
What's the annual meeting?
Day before.
No.
Oh, it's the week before.
So did we change it to the all Quarry Valley ones?
Big deal, huh?
It's the one where you tell
Just for
your.
the one through Jan.
No, it's, we only have one meeting
Right.
because we don't technically, give a budget report at town meetings anymore because we are a unified district. So we're required, and we have, it's called the annual meeting. So we have it in February. Last year we had it in Proctor. This year it'll be at Poultney High School.
Oh, for town to come.
For every, yeah,
You have
and we
to do it.
present the budget. I think I thought it was Tuesday, the 25th.
It is, it says GRCSU board, but it's
Quarry Valley.
Quarry Valley, it's just entered incorrectly.
So it's
It's
Tuesday,
at Poultney High School.
Tuesday the 25th,
Yep,
6 o'clock,
yep.
and that is when we present the budget,
Tuesday the one.
all right?
What, I'm sorry, what day was that?
Tuesday,
2/25
the 25th.
February we're talking.
at
I'm in
6
January.
o'clock
Yeah.
That's why.
at Poultney High School.
Got it.
I got it.
Okay?
You'll just have to throw baskets around us.
Okay,
Be in the library.
I'm just gonna add that to my.
okay.
You said 6 o'clock, not 7?
January.
6 o'clock.
You wanted it,
6 o'clock.
So,
Only's used to things at 7, but
Oh, it's too late.
I think we're gonna do it at 6 o'clock. I think, what do
nobody
we
comes
do?
anyway, so.
Yeah,
It says 6 o'clock, so if you set it at 6, it's 6.
Yeah,
Okay,
so I'm.
Because we talked about it and you said it
I just don't know that people.
like
in-
at your
in-
annual
In your
meeting.
March meeting, so, yeah, I don't know, I don't see if it says in here, but, from last year, but we're gonna say 6 o'clock.
people are busy. They hire
Okay.
us.
So, because it's kind of a tent, like,
Louis, what else?
okay. So to start, in the packet was a budget forecast. If you recall, earlier this year, I believe it was October, I provided just a limited forecast for the current year. We were running a deficit, it was just based on staffing. So this new forecast is for the full budget. And my process is I look at all staffing, and I bring that into the forecast based on current
What
salaries.
are we looking at? Which page are we looking at?
It says
Page one,
forecast. It looks
staffing
like a
forecast.
budget
Big one?
thing.
Okay, I just wanna make sure
Yep.
we're on, okay, thank you.
So the forecast for staffing, it just looks at all current staff and their current salaries and benefits. And then any other contracted stuff that I know we're gonna be spending more or less than what we budgeted, I reflect that in the forecast column. Any other expenses, like supplies, dues and fees, any of those discretionary type items, if we've spent more than budget, I reflect that in the forecast column. If we've spent less than budget, right now the forecast column still has the full budget. So based on all of those items, we're currently running a deficit of about 113,000. I have spoken with the principals, and we do have, I believe it was almost $300,000 in unspent discretionary line items. And when I say discretionary, it's like stuff that's not contracted, so supplies, dues and fees, professional services, anything where the small piece of the budget that the administrators have the most control over. So just when it's a very small piece of the budget, it's only about 5%. So I've already spoken with them about making up that $113,000 to make sure that we're ending in the black. It still gives them sufficient funds. We're already halfway through the year, but it gives them sufficient funds to still run their schools without freezing the budget. It's just not spending every line to its full budget amount.
How did we get 113,000 deficit?
Most
Was
of
there a
it's staffing.
particular-
We had a lot of staffing change at the end of last year, and just replacing that staffing with new staffing results in it could go either way, higher or lower, but in some cases it went higher. Changes in health insurance plans. So somebody going from a buyback to a family plan is a cost of about $20,000 difference. So we budget plans based on what they're in at that time. So if somebody changes at the end of the year from single to a two-person or single to a family, those are costs that we don't have budgeted, and sometimes they work in our favor and sometimes they don't, and this year they didn't. So I know when we looked at it, just the staffing piece a few months ago, just in one school there was 3 people that changed plans, and it was a result of $50,000 in extra cost that wasn't accounted for. So, I'm not too concerned yet. I think we can make it up, and we'll work towards that. And I'll update you on this in early spring.
Okay.
The next thing, I handed out 2 sheets of paper. The board requested at the last meeting some information on enrollments, staff ratios, master schedules. So the stapled sheet of paper that went around, those are the master schedules for the 3 high schools. They're not in any sort of common template just because of the complexities of them and the different schedules. So it's just each school's master schedule, one after the next. And then the single sheet of paper is for all schools, and it's broken down by secondary and elementary and then secondary. It looks at student count by school, teacher count, other staff count, and what those ratios are by school. And then it gives you a total for each elementary school, total for each secondary school, and then a total for each K-12 town. So in the other staff line, it includes all, for the elementaries, it would be specials, the librarian, the nurse, guidance counselors, psychologists, any other positions. The only positions that are not included in this, no special ed positions are included. No custodians or maintenance staff, and I also excluded administrators and office staff. Any questions on that before we go into the budget? And I'm sure as we talk about the budget and staffing, we may reference back to that. So looking at the budget, it is in the packet, it's stapled together, it looks like this. The first sheet is the summary page. It includes the summary of changes from draft 1 at the bottom. And then I've just added any new changes to draft 2 at the top. So at the last meeting, we were up $1.1 million. The board asked us to cut $500,000 out of the budget and come back with a range of cuts between $400,000 and $600,000. So what we've done, we met a couple weeks ago, all administrators and myself and Judy. And at that point, the SU budget had been approved, and other changes that were outside of our control had been put in. And So I updated the SU assessments with the final approved budget, which was a $140,000 reduction. There were some horizontal moves that I put into the budget. We had 5 additional retirements, and I updated our tuition revenue. And all of those changes resulted in a reduction of about $200,000. At our meeting, we talked about other cuts. We came up with an additional $300,000 in cuts. And then we put aside $100,000 in unallocated cuts that the 3 high school principals would work together over the course of the next few months and see how they could align schedules or share to staff and figure out how they could come up with additional cuts totaling that $100,000.
And that unallocated $100,000 is what will get you to $600,000. So the reductions you're seeing up to there are $500,000. And it was getting really tough to come up with another 100,000. And we all agreed that the only way it would happen is to do things differently. Like have some kind of a different, like the high schools would probably need to have the same schedule so they could do more sharing of classes and staff in order to get it. And that's why it's unallocated, because we simply haven't done that work. And that's probably an unorthodox way of doing it, but I have seen it done before in other districts where they say 100,000 unallocated and you better do it by July 1st. Or if you're notifying, if you're reducing staff, you have to do it by, before contracts come out. So, and you had said 400 to 600, so there was a range. So we got it to 500, but getting it to 600, that's really doing some deep changes and thinking and trying to think how you would reduce staff.
So based on those cuts, the total expenditures is now at $527,000, increase over last year, which is 2.99%. And total education spending is up by $573,000, which is 3.48%. We are still waiting for some data from the state. We do not have the 6-semester rolling average yet for tech centers. We do not have a solid equalized pupil number, although the preliminary numbers do seem to be an increase over last year. Last year we were at about 1,007. The last number that I saw was at 1,022. So we do have an uptick, which will reduce our spending per pupil. We don't have that final number yet.
Is that the number we were supposed to have by December 15th?
God, did I ask that?
So because the cuts do affect staffing, I did keep the summary vague, and I thought we could discuss more specifics in executive session.
I'm looking at the summary of changes, and the third one down, updated staff with 5 retirements. And then it says all positions replaced. What does that mean?
So we had at the last meeting, we had one retirement that we knew of that was in the budget, but there was 5 others that I was told about, but I hadn't had a chance to reflect that in the budget. So since then, I've put in their retirements, which they get a retirement benefit according to the master agreement. So that benefit is now in the budget. And then I have in the budget a replacement teacher at an estimated salary and benefits.
So it's replaced monetarily, but we haven't staffed those positions.
Correct. Yeah,
Right,
it's
and
so none of the positions
budgeted at
are
a
being
lower
cut.
rate,
They're all replaced.
thinking you're gonna get somebody
We
with,
should get savings. Yes. Okay, thank you. So we're at 500,000 in reductions in the first,
Until you
Up
get
to the unallocated, and then-
unallocated staffing.
Yeah, if you took that out, it's 500,000. But if you want to get to 6, we would have to figure that out.
And that 100,000 is in here. It's just in a one line item.
Right.
So I'm happy to get to 600. It is slightly unnerving, I guess, or a little bit in the dark, not knowing what that 100,000 is cutting at the high school. We're asking people, first you're asking us, you're asking me to say yes to something, not knowing what cut or implication that would be. And second, you're asking me to go sell it to my neighbor, not knowing what that cut or implication would be. I find that to be problematic. Perhaps you're going to discuss that with us in executive session, but I need to have some kind of idea. While it may be done in other districts, that is not something that, and maybe you did it in Pulteney prior, it is not something we did here. Before, we were very clear on what cuts would be made if a classroom teacher, what that would look like and what those implications would be. That's a bit of a struggle for me.
Well, I don't think this is something that was common with any of the schools. This is something that was new, and I think the discussion that occurred was more along the lines of, at the high school level, and I know we've been talking about this at this board since we've merged, that
Absolutely.
we need to start sharing staff, sharing resources. But the problem that everybody was in agreement on is that there's no aligned schedule, and it's hard to identify those cuts until we have our schedules aligned and could identify how we can share science teachers, how we can share math teachers. And so the thought is, once those schedules are aligned, and that work would take place over the next few months, once those schedules are aligned and we can look at those schedules and the needs at each school, we can determine where we have extra classes that can be reduced and result in a position cut. So to get to 100,000, just to put that into perspective, we would need to cut approximately 1.5 staff members.
And I guess with respect to the schedule, I mean, we haven't heard, it hasn't come back. I mean, what kind of schedule we're looking at? Are we looking at, whose schedule are we looking to model after? I mean, so we negotiated the contract so that we'll be on one schedule. That's something we're supposed to have been working on, and that conversation hasn't been back to even know what kind of schedule it is that we're looking at.
Well, I think, I know you guys have had a meeting.
Yeah, we're about to have a meeting in January.
Yeah. One of the things we just talked about pretty briefly is it will probably have to be some type of a block schedule, not necessarily Pulteney.
So I'm just gonna say, we were really clear that a block schedule was not something as a board that we were interested in. We were clear about that when we negotiated, and we were clear about that when we came back with the negotiated contract at this table. I don't think that.
Why not a block schedule?
A lot of reasons about planning time, the way that's built in, that we've all been through block schedules and it wasn't successful, and
You have to know how to teach in a block schedule. You
well,
can't
it
teach the other
wasn't
way.
the,
Can I finish for 1 minute?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I said is, I've seen many kinds of schedules, and as they look at their schedule, they might look at basically a blend of part block and part singletons, you call them, like regular 42, 45-minute periods. Because if you are going to try and share resources, maybe across districts of teachers or students, there may have to be some travel time, so you may need a little bit of one. Like, I've seen block schedules that go, say, like 45 minutes, 90, 90, 45, 45, or something like that. Like there are, hybrids. And that's something that I think might need to be considered. If you just do the straight 45, 42 minutes, it doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room. That's just a consideration. But I didn't know that. You guys had said, no, we don't want that at all. I had no idea, actually.
I didn't know that either.
I don't remember that for sure. 'Cause the sticking point was we're not on the same schedule, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
how
You've
realistic
gotta
in the
move
next
somewhere.
2 months, after a year and a half of this, is it likely that we'll be able to come up with something?
It's going to be realistic. That's why we negotiated it in the contract. That's why we negotiated as long as we did. And that was one thing we said when we merged, that we all need to be on a unified schedule. It's unrealistic to think that we're going to operate and continue to operate 3 high schools on 3 different schedules. I mean, we've done absolutely nothing that we said we were going to do upon merger. We haven't inventoried, we've had one class this year that's distance learning, so to speak. But all of these grandiose ideas that we sold when we did the merger, we're essentially operating exactly the way we were prior to this merger.
So why hasn't that happened?
Because we were all on different schedules.
Yeah,
That
but-
was,
So
that
why
was.
haven't we done the work to harmonize it, if that's what you're saying we haven't done? I mean,
We've
and I
been
don't
doing
think it's a
lots of
question
other
for you, I
things.
guess it's a question for the actual,
Been doing lots
My
of other
understanding
things.
is it started last year and then it fizzled out. Is that a correct description?
We'd spent a lot of work with this last year, and then with the departures of our superintendent, assistant superintendents, it fell apart. We did not have the backing or the pushback support to move forward, so.
What do you all see as the main hurdles? I mean, I can imagine what they are, but I would like a more informed judgment.
I'd be more
Transportation.
comfortable talking about this in executive session,
Yeah,
to be honest,
okay.
if that's okay. Just-
that is okay.
Let's do it.
So are there any other questions to be had in open session about the budget?
So, I think Gail maybe asked last time about specifics on what some of the cutting, actually what that means. So if we say like Proctor Elementary staff cut in the amount of 50K, so what does that look like on the ground? So those kinds
That's
of.
because it
That's-
involves personnel, that's why Lewis wants to go into executive
Okay.
session.
And then like dropping the after-school program plus reduced technology, do we have to talk about that in executive session
No.
too?
Oh, we can talk about that.
What technology will not be there, for example?
So that's for-
After-school program, that's gonna be a huge deal.
So
in
that's for
to
Polteny
not have
Elementary
that.
School. She. Okay, I was just reading the wrong line. So she, when I say she, Kristen
Right.
offered to cut $5,000 in supplies from her technology line, bringing it from 11,000 to 6,000, and dropping the after-school program, which was $10,000.
Yeah, those things seem
So
small pennies there comparatively to those.
So I view something, so the technology is one piece that I think is along the line of the right frame of thinking with cutting of expenditures. I think there could be a concern with the after-school program, because to me, it looks a little bit like passing the burden actually back onto families versus taking it inside the building. And as a Polteny parent who, upon talking with other Polteny parents, the consensus is we were all actually blindsided by this early release Tuesday.
It's a huge
Like
issue.
literally school started and we found this out. So this is already a major impact into the family schedules. This was last year, but this wasn't really, and hey, maybe the group of parents that I've discussed this with, maybe we were all hiding under the same rock, but that's literally been the situation with everyone I've spoken to. And it's
Early release isn't working, so.
it's a half a day. I mean, okay, it's technically more than half a day, but it's really close, right? 1:30 one day a week, everybody's out. I'm afraid that some families might have to give up employment for what is a town-wide $15,000 savings, or sorry, $10,000 savings.
But each administrator was asked and given a target of what they needed to cut based on their proportion of the target that was set by the board. So as we sat in the room together, based on those targets, principals threw out what they felt that they could cut with the least minimal impact.
Yes.
So what
I'm
about,
skeptical that $10,000 is the least impact. It's not. What can I base that on? Not much.
And I'm not disputing that with
Right,
you. I'm
right,
just
yeah.
reporting what
Right.
was
Right.
given to me.
That's one of those that started off as a grant funded. Grant monies ran out, went back into the local budget. You know, the typical,
Yeah.
she had grant monies when they first started that program, and
I guess my summarize is that it might be a very polarizing topic for the small amount of impact that one brings. I think I think it's pretty polarizing, actually. But
Well, I mean, we can go back to Kristen and say, you know, that you're, you would like her to consider looking for $10,000 elsewhere.
it's a tricky one, right? I wish I could poll the public and see if nobody's concerned, then let's do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
She's also has the least reduction when you look across the board as well. Compare it to.
Where are you
other
looking?
schools. Well, if you look in summary of changes on
Oh,
the
gotcha,
top.
yeah.
Yeah.
so for the high school, Joe, for the 80K reduction, what does that look like for you?
we have to go in executive session.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
we're
that's
just
fine.
going
That's
executive
totally fine.
session.
I just wanna.
Well, that's
make sure
fine.
that-
I just,
yeah.
if
If we're
people
gonna start
have
talking personnel, we need to.
questions that
And
are
I
not.
do also notice though, you know, going off what you said, that the least coming from Pulteney, but looking at the student staff ratio, Pulteney Elementary also has the highest, right? If I'm reading that correctly?
Yes.
Looked like to me.
Yep.
So if there are no other questions to be had, the other questions all revolve around personnel, then a motion to go into executive session would be in order.
I make the motion to go into executive session.
Second,
I second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll take a recess while we pack up, and we will be in executive session.